The studio lights felt warmer than usual as Will Smith settled into his chair, the polished surface beneath him reflecting the familiar Good Morning America glow. He flashed his trademark smile, the kind audiences had trusted for decades, and adjusted the mic clip neatly to his jacket. Around him, the set buzzed with quiet efficiency, camera operators gliding into position, producers murmuring through headsets, and assistants counting down the seconds with raised fingers. Michael Strahan sat across from him, relaxed but alert, his posture open, his expression friendly yet focused. At first, everything unfolded exactly as planned. The opening questions were light, even nostalgic. Michael teased Will about old movie roles, the ones that had defined entire generations, and Will responded with practiced humor, laughter spilling easily as he shared behind-the-scenes anecdotes. The audience responded warmly, clapping at familiar names and inside jokes. For a few minutes, it felt like another smooth celebrity interview, the kind viewers half-watched while sipping coffee. But beneath the surface, there was a current of tension that hadn't been there during rehearsal. As the conversation shifted toward Will's recent projects and public appearances, Michael's tone subtly changed. His questions grew more reflective, probing deeper into themes of responsibility, image, and growth. Will nodded thoughtfully at first, choosing his words with care, his smile fading into something more restrained. Michael leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees, and asked about lessons learned from past controversies, how public figures should respond when they fall short of expectations. It was a fair question, framed calmly, but the weight of it lingered in the air longer than expected. Will paused, eyes briefly flicking toward the camera, then back to Michael. He spoke about humanity, about mistakes being part of the journey, about refusing to let a single moment define a lifetime of work. The audience listened closely, the studio unusually quiet. Will's voice remained even, measured, but there was an edge now, a firmness that suggested the topic hit closer than intended. Michael acknowledged the point with a nod, but he didn't move on. Instead, he followed up, gently but persistently, asking how accountability should look when influence reaches millions. That was when the shift became undeniable. Will straightened in his chair, hands clasping together more tightly than before. His eyes sharpened, not angry, but intense. He spoke about the danger of reducing complex people to headlines, about the media's role in shaping narratives, and about the line between reflection and judgment. His words were eloquent, but the warmth that had filled the room earlier was gone. Michael listened, lips pressed together thoughtfully. When Will finished, Michael responded carefully, acknowledging the pressure of fame while reminding viewers that public trust comes with public roles. His voice remained calm, but his stance was clear. The two men now occupied different sides of an unspoken divide, each respectful, yet unwilling to yield. A soft murmur rippled through the audience. Producers behind the cameras exchanged glances. This wasn't in the rundown. The timing clock ticked on, red numbers flashing warnings that the segment was running long. Still, no one interrupted. The tension had become the moment. Will leaned forward, forearms resting on his thighs, speaking with more intensity now. He emphasized personal growth, the unseen work done away from cameras, the conversations never aired. His words flowed faster, passion rising despite his effort to stay composed. It wasn't an outburst, but it was no longer a polished soundbite either. It was raw, unscripted. Michael responded by grounding the conversation, steering it back toward the audience at home. He spoke about curiosity, about asking hard questions not to accuse, but to understand. Yet his insistence that those questions mattered only seemed to deepen the divide. Will's jaw tightened slightly. His smile did not return. The studio felt smaller, the lights harsher. A producer's voice crackled urgently through Michael's earpiece, suggesting a pivot, a wrap-up. Michael raised a hand subtly, signaling he had it under control. He turned back to Will, attempting one last bridge, thanking him for his honesty while framing the exchange as an important dialogue. Will took a breath. For a moment, it looked like he might soften, that the tension would dissolve into a respectful conclusion. Instead, he spoke again, slower this time, choosing each word carefully. He made it clear he welcomed conversation, but not framing that reduced lived experience to a lesson for others. His tone wasn't hostile, but it was firm, unmistakably so. The audience clapped hesitantly, unsure whether applause was appropriate. Michael nodded, absorbing the words, but his expression signaled that the segment had crossed into uncomfortable territory. He glanced briefly toward the camera, then back to Will, maintaining professionalism even as the moment slipped further from control. Behind the scenes, stage managers whispered urgently. The show had schedules, advertisers, expectations. This was live television, and unpredictability was only charming up to a point. A decision was being made in real time, even as the conversation continued. Will leaned back at last, exhaling slowly. His posture suggested finality, as if he had said what he came to say. The silence that followed was heavy, stretching just a beat too long. Michael offered a polite closing remark, thanking Will for joining them and wishing him success in his upcoming work. His voice was steady, but the atmosphere remained charged. As the camera pulled back slightly, the music cue hovered, waiting for the signal. The audience clapped again, louder this time, trying to smooth over the edges of what they'd just witnessed. Will gave a brief nod, not quite a smile, eyes still serious. The segment was ending, but everyone in the studio sensed that the moment itself was far from over. The music cue finally rolled, a few seconds too late, and the cameras cut to a wide shot that felt like a collective exhale. Michael Strahan thanked the audience, his voice steady, practiced, the kind that had carried countless live moments back onto safe ground. But the calm was only surface deep. As soon as the red light blinked off, the studio atmosphere shifted dramatically. Will Smith rose from his chair with deliberate calm, smoothing his jacket, his expression unreadable. A producer approached with a polite but urgent smile, gesturing toward the side exit reserved for guests between segments. The gesture was subtle, but its meaning was clear. This was no longer a friendly transition to the next commercial break. Will nodded once, not in submission, but in acknowledgement, and stepped away from the set as murmurs rippled through the audience. Behind the cameras, voices overlapped. Headsets buzzed with rapid-fire instructions. Someone mentioned, damage control. Another reminded everyone they were still live in 30 seconds. Michael remained on set, shoulders squared, listening intently to the producer feeding him lines through his earpiece. His expression shifted briefly, concern, then resolve. Whatever had just happened would be handled with professionalism. Backstage, Will moved down the narrow corridor lined with monitors replaying the segment from multiple angles. He caught a glimpse of himself on screen, leaning forward, eyes intense, and looked away. An assistant attempted small talk, mentioning the weather, the next appearance on his schedule. Will didn't respond, not out of anger, but because he was clearly still processing the moment. When they reached a quiet holding area, another producer approached, thanking him for coming but explaining, carefully, that it would be best if he exited the building through the private entrance. Will listened, hands clasped loosely in front of him. He didn't argue. He simply said, calmly, that conversations matter, especially uncomfortable ones. The producer nodded, offering an apologetic smile that carried more tension than warmth. Moments later, Will was escorted out, the sound of the studio fading behind him. On set, Michael took a breath as the cameras rolled again. He addressed viewers at home with composed sincerity, acknowledging that live television sometimes brings unexpected moments. He spoke about the value of dialogue and differing perspectives, choosing words that neither blamed nor escalated. His tone reassured the audience, but his eyes revealed the weight of responsibility that comes with steering such moments in real time. As the show moved on, social media did not. Clips of the exchange spread rapidly, trimmed, captioned, debated. Some praised Will for speaking candidly, applauding his refusal to be reduced to a headline. Others sided with Michael, emphasizing the importance of accountability and tough questions. Hashtags began trending before the show even ended, opinions forming faster than context could keep up. In the control room, executives watched the numbers climb. Engagement was skyrocketing, but so were concerns. Emails flew between network offices. Statements were drafted, revised, softened. The line between a compelling moment and a PR issue is thin, and everyone knew they had crossed it. By midday, the story had taken on a life of its own. Entertainment outlets dissected body language, tone, pauses. Experts were invited to comment on communication, fame, and public responsibility. Some called it a necessary confrontation. Others labeled it an unfortunate escalation. Few could agree on where the line had been crossed, only that something had shifted. Michael Strahan addressed the moment later that day in a brief follow-up, emphasizing respect for Will Smith and reiterating that his role was to ask questions viewers were already asking. His words were measured, diplomatic, designed to lower the temperature without retreating from principle. The response was mixed but largely appreciative of his composure. Will, for his part, remained quiet at first. No immediate statement, no social media clarification. The silence itself became a statement, interpreted in countless ways. When he finally spoke through a short message released by his team, it focused on growth, conversation, and the importance of being seen as fully human. It didn't mention Good Morning America by name, but the meaning was unmistakable. Inside the industry, the moment became a case study. Producers discussed how live interviews can pivot without warning. Hosts reflected on balancing empathy with responsibility. Publicists reminded clients that every appearance carries risk, especially when the past lingers in the present. For the audience, though, it was something more personal. Some saw themselves in Will's insistence on nuance. Others connected with Michael's belief in asking difficult questions out loud. The clash wasn't just between two famous men, it mirrored broader conversations happening everywhere, about forgiveness, accountability, and who gets to define the narrative. Days later, the studio lights at Good Morning America shone as brightly as ever, the chairs filled with new guests, new stories. Yet, the echo of that morning lingered. Not as scandal alone, but as a reminder of why live television still matters. Because it captures moments that can't be fully scripted, moments that reveal tension, truth, and the fragile balance between them. And somewhere between the headlines and the hashtags, the heated clash settled into something quieter. A moment people would argue about, analyze, and remember, long after the cameras had moved on.